Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're just going to give it a minute here. I do want to let everyone know that we are recording already, and this recording is going to be available, I believe, a week after this presentation. So yeah, thank you everyone so much for being here. I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation that you are all here to learn about.
Atlas, we still have a few people coming in.
When you say a few, do you mean
It says
like,
joining for about 7 people, so
oh,
I think
okay.
just a little bit slow. And folks, if you can mute yourself during the presentation, and we'll do some questions afterwards.
Thank you so much for that announcement, Catherine.
I'll let you know as soon as I have the joining. Everybody's in.
Okay.
All right. Atlas, make sure you're unmuted. Okay, and I think we're good. We still have folks joining, but that's okay. I think you're ready to go.
Okay, thank you. I was having a difficult time finding where the mute button had went because the screen has moved. All right, welcome everyone. My name is Atlas Fernandez. I use they and them pronouns. And today I am here to talk to you all about the 2025 WOOF RFP for projects serving families. I will be joined and supported by a couple of folks here at the organization. Oh, I see two familiar faces already. And I'm just going to go ahead and introduce them. And then later on, you will hear a familiar name. So I'll be supported today by Bettina Beris, who is a part of our research and evaluation, and she will be explaining compliance, reporting, and questions surrounding all of that. Catherine Bicknell, who is the voice that you heard at the start. She is our communications specialist. And then Jackie Pueo, who is our finance director, and Mandy Park, who is our Director of Operations. And both of them will be helping support the contracts process and answering any of those questions. So our agenda for today is succinct, and I want to get it to where we get to your questions because those are the important parts. So we're going to do a little welcome. Hello. I'm going to tell you all about building changes and the Washington Youth and Family Fund. We're going to go over a funding overview, as well as talk about the 2025 to 2028 family strategy and the application. And we're going to get to know a little bit more about the review and selection process timeline, and then we're going to get into the Q&A. All right, about building changes. So building changes advances equitable responses to homelessness across Washington by developing community-driven strategies, advocating for systems change, and partnering across sectors to ensure children, youth, and families can thrive. So we advocate, build, and convene. We advocate for policies and investments that address structural inequities and improve outcomes for children, youth, and young adults. We build innovative community-informed strategies that promote homelessness prevention and long-term solutions. We convene trusted cross-sector partners to align systems and co-create change, centering communities, shaping systems, preventing homelessness. Our BC our racial equity statement. So at Building Changes, we seek to hold ourselves accountable for addressing racism and discrimination. Disparities in homelessness among Black, Indigenous, and people of color, Pacific Islander, Asian, immigrant, refugee, and LGBTQIA2S+ communities are well documented, yet many intersecting identities, including disability, gender identity, and immigration status, remain underrepresented in data and systems design. We cannot address homelessness without addressing racism at its roots and the trauma it continues to perpetuate. We set universal goals to end homelessness and pursue targeted solutions to achieve these goals. Our work in race equity does not stop there. We are committed to building an internal culture that challenges racism within our organization. So, WOOF, the Washington Youth and Families Fund, is a public-private partnership to fund nonprofits, tribes, social service providers, agencies, um, to provide housing-based services and financial assistance to youth and young adults and families experiencing homelessness and housing instability. Just a little reminder for everyone to be on mute, please. Uh, this fund is administered through building changes through a contract with the Department of Commerce, and it's been around since 2004 and has put out over 60 million for 122 projects in 26 counties across the state. We recognize that housing instability and homelessness looks unique depending on community, and that young people face specific barriers in accessing and stable housing. So that being said, we report on specific outcomes related to housing statuses and length of time accessing services. Finally, we've seen that Washington Youth and Families Fund can be an extremely powerful tool in promoting new and innovating ideas that help an organization demonstrate capacity to access larger public dollars. This being the case, we try to prioritize newer organizations for our fundings. Our projects that really reflect something new or an intention on something that has been done in community but hasn't been done at a larger scale. So, the meat of it all and why you are all here. The funding opportunity, in total, it's $1 million for projects serving families, and award amounts are anywhere between 250 and 500,000 per organization, depending on what the committees end up narrowing it down to. So it is different allocations per year. So it'll be split up in a 3-year funding cycle between 2025 and 2028. Payments are done in an annual lump sum disbursement. So indirect and direct costs are eligible, and there is required fiscal and programmatic reporting. I'll name this here, and it'll be named again. This is not a reimbursable grant, I believe. So that means that when the payment at the beginning of the contract is given, you have your money. You do not have to submit a reimbursement. Who is eligible to apply? Nonprofit, community, neighborhood-based, or regional, statewide housing assistance agencies, federally recognized tribes, local housing authorities, and public development authorities. So money can be used for direct assistance and services for people, operational cost, staff training, travel, equipment, supplies, indirect costs, meaning HR, executive staff, finance, fund development, insurance, and or occupancy costs. Culturally specific organizations or smaller organizations led and staffed by people of color that primarily serve communities of color by and for organizations are encouraged to apply, even if not currently delivering homelessness or housing services. And we strive for a statewide geographic diversity. Building Changes is committed to transforming how Washington responds to family homelessness by centering equity, healing, and prevention. For the 2025 Washington Youth and Families Fund funding cycle, we are focusing on 2 key shifts: expanding inclusive definitions of family to better reflect Washington's diverse communities, and strengthening community-driven approaches that combine flexible housing supports with culturally rooted healing practices. Our learning through these projects and our previous partnerships have demonstrated value. Tribes and organizations successfully utilized flexible funding to provide culturally attuned healing practices amongst people that reflected them. In our most recent partnership, this included healing circles, movement, art, yoga, somatics, sweat lodge ceremonies, partnership with mental health professionals like counselors to aid community members with behavioral and mental health healing pathways and support. So this aim is to heal historical trauma, which has been perpetuated on Indigenous and Black people through political, systematic, institutional, and cultural violence. Through these systems, racism continues to impact not only Black, Indigenous, and people of color, including Pacific Islander and Asian communities, but for all people of the global majority, including immigrants, refugees, migrants, and LGBTQIA+ communities. While disproportionalities in housing instability and homelessness are well documented for BIPOC communities, we also recognize that some identities remain visible within current systems and data, limiting equitable access to culturally responsive services. The other portions of the strategy include expanding organizational capacity among providers to deliver housing and healing supports that are flexible, culturally responsive, and community informed. Strengthening partnerships across sectors, so housing, health, education, and community to create more interconnected systems to reduce service duplication. And this looks a lot like if you serve immigrant and refugees, but do not serve immigrants and refugees who identify as LGBTQIA+, it looks like partnering with an organization that is attuned to that identity and is able to partner with you to give you the necessary tools to provide that service to the community member in a way that they feel represented and seen. And finally, to generate and share learnings about what works, building statewide knowledge that informs future policy and funding decisions. Through this strategy, Building Changes seeks to partner with organizations that lead with community wisdom, practice cultural humility, and are ready to innovate at the intersection of housing and healing. By centering families' own definitions, identities, and goals, we can build systems that are more inclusive, connected, and effective, ensuring that those currently experiencing homelessness can find stability today and remain housed tomorrow. And now we get into the granting and compliance that is required for the Washington Youth and Families Fund. Once this is awarded, the grant we will begin the process of putting together the contract, and it outlines the requirements for the grants. There is a schedule on when certain reporting is due, and it will also include templates as to what is necessary, and we will also provide that as well. So the overview of that is a financial risk assessment, a grantee contact list, a contract documents, which include the grant budget and scope of work, reporting requirements, payments, and a monitoring site visit, which happens once throughout the partnership. And at this point, I'd like to invite Jackie and Mandy to provide a little bit more context of, oops, provide a little bit more context and information to the granting and compliance.
Thanks, Atlas. Can you all hear us? Are we audible?
Yeah, you can hear
Okay,
me.
great. So as Atlas said, these documents are before, like if once a grantee is selected to be a grantee with the Washington Youth and Families Fund, they would go through a financial risk assessment, which Jackie's team conducts. I don't know if you want to say any more about what that entails.
Do you mind pulling the document?
Oh, sure.
Sorry. Yeah, the financial risk assessment, it is also required by Commerce as part of our agreement in their own contract. And so our risk assessment just helps us to determine I guess how would I best describe this, but it helps us determine if the grade, not so much the grade, but for
Sort of the
monitoring.
financial infrastructure and stability, just to give us a sense of where your financial infrastructure is at as an organization so that we as building changes can be prepared for what level of support we will want to provide you all through the duration of our relationship.
And thank you, Mandy. And usually the documents that we do ask to be able to do a financial risk assessment usually contains the most recent 990 audited financial statements, and also, and if neither is one provided, then we usually ask for the year-to-date financials, which is like the statement of revenue and expenditures and a budget.
Yeah, and then just an example of some other documents that we would collect are, we have a grantee contact list that we'll have you complete, which is basically just some key roles that we'll be continuing to interact with throughout the duration of the relationship. Both, you know, the signer, who the financial person is on your team, who the programmatic person is on your team, and various other contacts. You will work with Atlas as the grant lead on this to sort of make sure that you're on track with your budget, and that your scope of work align with. You've fleshed out most of that in your application, but just kind of making sure that all of that fits together once we're doing the contract. We will lay out the reporting schedule in that contract, which I believe for WOOF is quarterly reporting, financial reporting, and then twice a year, a narrative report. And then we will also determine a payment schedule, which may be adjusted throughout the contract, depending on how the spend down is occurring. And then, as Atlas mentioned, a monitoring site visit will happen once in the duration of our relationship, and that will include sort of preliminarily, we will get some financial information from you, as well as some programmatic reporting on data and just elements of your programmatic infrastructure at the organization. Is that good, Atlas?
That is wonderful. Thank you so much, both of you, for adding that brilliance. Because yeah,
and just to underscore the fight, like we said, the financial risk assessment isn't a make or break. Like if you do this, you're in. If you don't do this, you're out. It's more, again, to give us a sense of what type of relationship we're going to have. Some grantees have really robust infrastructure and have been operating for a really long period of time. And that's great because that enables us to give a little bit more of our time and resources to organizations that don't have robust of an infrastructure. So it's not a test, but it is certainly information that helps us to prepare for our relationship together.
yeah, thank you so much for adding that. I wanted to one, echo what Mandy has said, and additionally provide context that we, as Building Changes, want to be prepared and able to give you the support necessary. And Building Changes is not a financial advisor, and we don't make any advisement on any finances or systems that need to be in place. But if that financial risk assessment determines that there needs to be a lot more infrastructure set up, it's also a good thing for us to know to say, hey, we're not in a good position to be able to provide the necessary support that's required for our relationship to be as beneficial and as fruitful. But it is not like it's a lens is the best way that I can put it, but it's not a make or break type deal. It just allows us to make the best informed decision. All right, thank you all. So what does success look like throughout this grant? Evaluation of this work is completed annually and reported back to the Department of Commerce. So the following elements are necessary to report on. And in addition, in addition to extra evaluation activities in relation to how you would like Building Changes to use your data and how we build that and get that back to you, as well as participation within the learning circle and the cohort as a whole. So The reporting will be in regards to successful exits to permanent housing, increased confidence in maintaining stable housing, families reporting satisfaction with their housing resolution, and an increased sense of safety and stability. So housing stability success looks like achieving stabilized housing for families experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness by putting flexible funds towards housing stability and housing crisis resolution by means of rapid rehousing, diversion, or motel hotel assistance. Further success looks like, and are reported by building changes, sorry, further success looks like our previous relationships with our two partners, Mother Nation and Freedom Project, who were able to um, take what they knew from community, which was providing culturally attuned care and being responsive in a way that made people feel seen, to successful housing and to stable housing. Additionally, evaluation of this work will be completed annually, and these are the additional portions. Increased connection to cultural identity, indigeneity, ancestry, and or cultural roots, an increased sense of belonging and interconnectedness, an increased sense of positive self-regard, self-love, self-knowledge, an increased knowledge of impacts of systems of oppression on an individual and collective experience and well-being, increased self-awareness of body, mind, and spirit resilience, an increased knowledge and information about historical and racial trauma, increased knowledge of healing and care options and opportunities for well-being. So service success looks like developing or expanding programs that are reported as helpful or useful by participants. And they also look like continuing practices that have been culturally embedded in your community. That's also part of the innovation is bringing to the forefront what has already been happening and allowing that to flourish by funding it. So this grant does require for the organization to use and to track the funding through HMIS, which is the Homeless Management Information System. HMIS is a nationwide electronic recording system that enables information gathering about and continuous case management of homeless persons across agencies. Using HMIS to report on any client and their household served by the Washington Youth and Families Fund is a requirement. Building Changes works at the beginning of granting on outlining what HMIS data collection is involved and what that looks like, and we can also point you to where support is needed. So if that means further training on HMIS or accessing HMIS, sometimes that can be a big roadblock for organizations that have not had a grant that requires HMIS work. Building Changes can assist in communicating with the Department of Commerce on getting grantees HMIS access for new users. And to learn more, you can go ahead and take a look at the Department of Commerce's page on HMIS or HUD. And at this point, I would like to invite Bettina Bariz to say any additional information that I may have missed or any context that might be helpful for introduction to the HMIS system. And if there are no additionals, that's okay too.
Thanks, Atlas. So in terms of information that we are collecting here, if you are already actively working in this space, we hope that you have some way of tracking the data that you are inputting for folks that you are helping. So we're looking at things like household size information. We're looking at, like Atlas said, looking at the funds that are used for the grant period. We're also looking to see where those funds are going. And that'll help us determine, one, how much of the dollars are actually going to the people that are being served and what those services look like, which will help us get a clear picture of what the needs for folks are. And we'll also look at things like demographic information, and we'll also look at, if people are coming back for services through that. So it is really important that there's at least some form of familiarity with HMIS to be able to help, go ramp that up relatively quickly so that, we can keep track of all of the wonderful work that people will be doing.
Thank you so much, Bettina. I would like to add that if you are an organization that has not had to work with HMIS in a while, or this is the first time, in our previous
You're supposed to get mad, and you're like,
in our previous cohort, in our current cohort, it took some partners um, about 6 to 8 months to access the information system, which delayed services being able to be provided to community. So that is one of the reasons why we are stressing, please either already have access to HMIS or um, have recently worked with HMIS to know the intricacies of the system.
But to clarify, like
Okay.
previous experience with HMIS, so like by the time we apply, we don't necessarily have to already have started the process in being enrolled in the HMIS system. We just need to like you said, start it as soon as possible because it takes some time. But at the time of application, would it be helpful to like mention like we use these reporting systems. We have not used HMIS, but we intend on starting that process on this date. Like, would that be helpful, or is it like kind of more required? Like you're leaning more towards organizations that have that already set up.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. So please note if you have current access to HMIS because you have a grant on there, or if you have previous experience. If you, I believe if you don't have a grant that requires HMIS access, you are not able to pre-apply or to get onto it. But it would be helpful just because uh, depending on which county on which county and where within the state the partner is accessing HMIS, it could be a different system. So it would be good to know to just be like, what is down the road for potential partnerships in this area and what is necessary from our relationship with the Department of Commerce to be mm, as fluid as we can be so that community can have service delivery.
Thank you. And I
Alice,
think
I don't know if we answered the question around, is it required to apply? It is not required to apply. Atlas was sharing that those who have not had historical access to HMIS have spent a good chunk of their time being onboarded, and a huge part of their technical assistance or beginning stages was spent on access and trainings, but it is not a requirement for you to apply. And just so it was just an experience and then an opportunity, but it's not a requirement.
Yeah,
thank
thank you so much for that, Murat. It is not a requirement. It is something that we stated on the application as something where it would put, it is preferential for the organization to have already had HMIS experience or be having the ability to get on there quickly. So other evaluation activities, although the main measurements are from HMIS, Building Changes strives to include a full picture of the impact of the work through both qualitative and quantitative data and creates an evaluation plan that includes other elements of interest. These elements reported on are gathered from our narrative reports that we ask from twice a year, regular learning circles that take place on a regular cadence for all grantees, depending on the whole cohort schedule and depending on geographically where everyone is located, as well as partnerships with organizations and community experts to provide competent care and service delivery. And finally, client data from HMIS, which is entered by the grantees on a regular basis. And I'll give y'all a view of what the timeline is. The initial proposal, because this time around in funding, we are not requiring a full application, but rather a letter of interest that has hopefully on the receiving end been have felt shorter. We did a concerted effort to really narrow down on what questions we're asking in order for this process to not be so laborsome. And initial proposals for the Washington Youth and Families RFP is due on Monday, December 8th, 2025, and you have until Monday at 11:49. So right till the last second there, y'all can get it in. The finalist application process will begin January 5th, and it'll run through the 30th of the new year in 2026, with finalists award being announced in the first week of February 2026, and hoping that contracting will be in place by mid-February 2026. And then right now I'm gonna share the website because it can be a little convoluted to get to the application. And I just want to walk y'all through how I get there so that we are all aware. Okay, so being on the landing page of building changes, take it right there to the beginning. Sorry, this little bar is in my way and I have to wait for it to move. Okay, we go to the column Help Building Changes. And on this landing page, we just scroll to the bottom where it says Apply for Funding, Learn More. And on this page here, it's detailed what we're currently funding and how to apply. Okay, y'all, thank you so much for listening to me talk at you. At this moment, I will invite you to talk at me back and give me any questions or any clarification moments that y'all may have. And I'll also
Atlas,
take a moment to take a
there
look at
are
the
a
chat.
lot of questions in the chat.
In the
Wonder if
chat I
we
just
just
saw.
wanna, if we wanna just kind of scroll up and start from the top. And also just for your information, I've copied and pasted all of those. So if we don't have time to get to all of them, maybe we can follow up with written responses to like a
Yeah,
collective written response.
absolutely. I'm gonna start at the beginning then.
Awesome.
So from Taiwan, we have one, is it up to 500K per year or up to 500K spread across the 3 years? And the award amounts are anywhere from 250,000 to 500,000 total spread across the 3 years. And the second part of Thee's question is, sorry, I just gotta make this little box bigger. Is food access support a required strategy or just a prioritized strategy alongside flexible funding and healing supports? So we have provided additional strategies or reference points of how to use the strategies based off of how our current and previous cohorts have been able to utilize Washington Youth and Family Funds and have been able to support the community needs that have been reported. So so for example, if food access support for the community that you're serving is not a requirement and it's not a need that they're showing, then it wouldn't make so much sense for your organization to pursue that strategy. And I would recommend that the Washington Youth and Families Fund flexible spending dollars be applied in a way that makes the most sense. And then Thea, I saw a thumbs up. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to Susan's question. If the organization focuses on youth and young adults who are homeless with or without children, would this qualify for us to apply? If the organization focuses on youth and young adults who are homeless with or without children. There are a lot of things that quantify what makes up a family, and we leave it up to the organization who is serving that community. So for example, if this youth and young adult makes up, or sorry, make up is components of a 19-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 12-year-old, for example, and they constitute themselves as a family, and the organization is serving them as a family, then they would qualify. But it really all depends on down to what the organization and how the community member identifies. Susan, did that answer your question?
Kind of. I think I wrote it wrong. So we run a primary focused youth organization. We deal with single youth as well as family youths. And I want to make sure that if the funding is specific for only families, regardless of how they identify. I understand that portion of it, but it needs to be focused specifically on families only. Like I couldn't use the money for a single youth. It has to be specifically for a family youth.
Thank you for re-asking your question. And yes, the way that you're asking it is correct. So flexible funding from the Washington Youth and Families strategy would have to be used on a family that is constituted by either themselves or the community definition. However, we do have a separate funding source and an RFP for youth and young adults that will be coming up, and it will be released at the second half of this month. And I highly suggest that you sign up for that because I believe that that is where unaccompanied youth or youth would be able to solely receive access of services and funding from.
Thank you for saying that because that is where I kind of wanted to focus and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Leah, your question is, will providers be able to give gift cards for food, or will we need to work with a food bank to give food gift boxes directly to clients? Will providers be able to use the housing funding? Okay, sorry, that's two questions. The first question, will providers be able to give gift cards for food, or will we need to work with food bank or give food gift boxes directly to clients? You can do all three. If it is more accessible and it makes sense for the community members in your area to come to you or for you to come to them and provide a culturally relevant or food access gift card to them, you can do that. If it works better for the organization to partner up with a food bank and give gift food boxes, that sounds wonderful as well. And I recommend that if it's within your capacity to do both. And if you want to give directly to like gift food boxes and maybe have a pantry day or establish a pantry within your organization as something as a basic needs element for your community, that is also that's also available. What I look for and what I support with partnerships is executing the idea and the need for community service the way that it has been dictated by community. So if community is telling you that they need like basics like flour, oil, eggs, and a pair of shoes for a job interview, I have a partner who has all that available for their community members and fully support that. The second portion, will providers be able to use the housing funding? Like with any service that is available, if there is not already a procedure and protocol within the organization for, say, a housing advocate to use the housing services of the organization, there would need to be one in place. And then the housing advocate or person seeking funding from the Washington Youth and Families Fund would not be able to administer it themselves. They would have to have another case manager or another person, third party, in the same way that that person would assist a community member. That community member is not helping themselves. So there just has to be practices and procedures in place in order for everyone to be in standing. And then, yeah, it just has to be notified.
Okay, sorry. So I think I cut off my question in there. So will providers be able to use the housing funder for eviction prevention, paying back rent for clients?
Thank you so much, Leah. That is also a question that is very important. And if your organization has provided rental relief, and essentially if that payment allows for your community member to be safe and stably housed, and that is a route that the organization is taking by paying off the back rent or by paying off the balance on their account, that is something that is available. However, with the annual budget and the amount that's set up for flexible funding for back rent or for move-in costs, if the average amount is $13,000 and what's been allotted for the year is $70,000, that $70,000 is going to go pretty quickly if every person who comes in is expected and available to have their arrears paid for. So it's not that it's not allowable. It's just that there's only a certain amount of money for the year and for the contract. So I would just caution, um, if that is the need and that is what's being presented, absolutely go ahead, I support it. But at the end of that funding, that is the end of that funding. So we have to be strategic in how we're going to braid services and how we're going to access different providers within our agency network so that we can have a community member remain housed and build a plan that doesn't build off solely one organization paying off one person's arrears.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you for elaborating and giving me the rest of your question.
No problem.
And then this question is from M. Hello, how many grants do you expect to award? That is a wonderful question. It comes down to availability. Like I said at the beginning, we have $1 million for total funding, and I believe that would be anywhere from 2 to 3 grantees, but it really depends on the community review panels, internally the panel that we do, and then what is connecting to the work and how we can really um, deepen our sense of purpose and availability for what we have to fund and what community needs are. Did that answer your question, Em?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth asks, do services including shelter that support unaccompanied homeless youth 13 to 17 qualify for this funding opportunities? I would say that
I think you
yes.
answered it earlier.
Oh, okay. I would say yes and no. It just depends on how that community identifies and where they're going to. But Elizabeth, do you feel like you have an answer?
Yes, thank you. You answered it earlier.
Okay,
I appreciate it.
Okay. Nicole asks, are all these success measures expected, or can a program slash project include several but not all? So all the measures of success that were shared earlier are a shared expectation that is the goal of our project. We would like to see that happen. We understand that sometimes is not the reality, and we learn from that as well. Nicole, did that answer your question?
I'm wondering a little bit more, working with immigrant and refugee communities. I don't know that we necessarily do any like education around increased knowledge and information about historical and racial trauma. And I'm just curious how that might fit in as a success measure for what we're doing when we're dealing with those who have arrived within the last 5 years.
Okay.
So that, I guess that's where I'm issues around some of that would take some additional education outside the typical scope. So I'm just trying to assess the fit, I guess. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for providing more on your question, Nicole. So, um, my reference point is an organization out of King County that is doing a lot of work in Kent with immigrant and refugees, who, amongst many, are from Somalia, Iraq, I believe 3 other locations. Their main focus is really at the start of mental health and wellness, of understanding that this person has just experienced a major forced move, and they are in a place where they don't know the language, don't know how to get access to services, let alone how to even begin to heal. And NAAPR really takes the approach of centering within community and providing those pathways to either within amongst themselves in community to have that type of camaraderie, relationship, cultural community practices, and then accessing that through either culturally competent food, um, relevant outings, healing circles, speaking to them in their language and providing them their information in the language that they're familiar with. So that's what that looks like, and that's what when we speak about that success measure of increased knowledge and information about historical and racial trauma, it's definitely about reaffirming the experiences that people have had and then centering those people in the practice of being in community with one another and then obtaining services, which I believe is very important for culturally competent and attuned care. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think I was taking a more societal view of what that historical trauma was, not necessarily a personal individual view in the in context. So thank you for giving context.
Yeah. I muted myself. Jordan asks, are newer agencies qualified for funding? I would say that our most new organizations have been in operation for 3 years. Again, all that we ask is that there are certain protocols and systems in place so that there is a way that you track your funding, that you are able to explain and provide to us. So, because again, we're not financial advisors, we are able to do technical assistance and capacity building, but it does have to be beneficial for both our capacity and what your needs as an organization are. Because we don't ever want to step into a partnership where we can actually provide you what you need in order to be successful. Jordan, does that answer your question? If not, please let me know and interrupt whenever you are able to. I'm going to move on to Amy's question. Would this grant cover proposed programs, activities, or staff? And are there any funding limited areas? So this grant would cover the proposed program, activities, and staff required to maintain the program. Again, that is all within the award amount. So if it needs to be braided in order for that $500,000 to stretch the best way that you want it to, we can workshop that. We can talk about that. Ultimately, it is the decision lies on the organization and how they would best like to deliver maximum amount of funds flexibly to community. And then the second part of Amy's question is, when considering the grant compliance, what is the estimated type of compliance and reporting? So for grant compliance, we have quarterly financial reports that are due. Those are non-negotiable. We need to know where everything is at, where the money is going, and how we can assist to reflect that as best as possible. And then twice yearly narrative reports that allow us a deeper insight onto how the work is being done. And it also allows the organization to share outside of service delivery, how this is impactful, what is meaningful to the organization, and as well what they would like to communicate to commerce. Amy, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
So I'm going to move on to Megan. Megan asks, do you have any additional information about potential data privacy challenges regarding client information on HMIS, particularly immigrant population? Megan, I myself don't have additional information. I know that recently, like, more information is being added in order to, like, be asked. However, at any point, so we do require that an organizational partner ask the question that is being asked by the HMIS system, but that does not mean that the person on the other end has to answer, and they are able to say, oh, I don't want to provide that information. I refuse to provide that information. The point is that you asked. Does that answer your question, Megan?
Yes, thank you. And someone else asked a question around that, and Dimitri answered it in the chat, which was helpful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Sorry, Atlas, I popped in, sliding in. Hey, everyone, I'm Dimitri, just answering some of the questions in the chat. Lots of great questions, but appreciate that, Atlas, you can focus on what you're getting, and I'll try and get the ones in the chat as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Just so everyone walks away with the knowledge they came here seeking. Um, are you able, so Echo asks, are you able to work with another organization to enter HMIS info? No. Your organization, the one who is granted, has to be the one entering the HMIS information because it's sensitive data that no one else besides the client, the customer, sorry, not the customer, the community member, the client, or the person receiving services, and the advocate or the person giving those services should be seeing, entering. That information should not be communicating or traveling anywhere for someone else to enter it.
The reason that I asked that is because I'm actually certified for YDIP and HPDF, and in the past when we were certified through Away Home Washington, we were taking those documents, and I believe I haven't done one lately, uploading them or passing them along in some way. So so that's why I asked that. It's not that it would be someone that's obviously a part of that system as well, I guess is why I asked that particular question. So I myself wasn't certified, I don't have access to HIMIS, but I've worked with organizations actually in a variety of different cases. I've worked with REACH before as well. You know what I mean? So there's different organizations that have that access. So that's why we partnered with them, and that's where that question came from.
Thank you for providing that context. I'm thinking like a third party like person doing this. I'm like, no, we can't have that. But if you have a system, Echo, that you're a part of and that you know that works because you're in that system, I will defer to your knowledge. So thank you. And then your second question here is, what is the typical award size where there'll be smaller awards or just larger ones? And for us this year, smaller awards are starting, it's looking like $250,000 would be our smallest, up to $500,000. Does that answer your question, Echo?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Gloria, given the likelihood that there will be drastic cuts to federal housing grants, and then references a New York Times article, is there any chance of pushing the due date back so we have time to assess the impact of cuts, which may change our proposal? Gloria, that's a great question, and I understand that it's in the vein of being prepared and having all the answers at your disposal, and that's also what's influencing our decision to step forward with our RFP proposals at this time in this fashion. So unfortunately, at this time, we do not see any due dates being pushed back. If that does change, we will make sure to alert everyone who's available. But I do understand that that puts the organization in a big question mark of a state. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Kristen asks, will the slides be available on the website? Yes, the slides, I believe actually the recording and the FAQ, so this portion of the frequently asked questions will be on the website. I'm unsure of the capacity of having the slides. I will connect with Catherine after this and ask her if it's possible to have like a download of the slides so that they can be referenced and shared. And then if that's not possible, Kristen, I can email you. So if you could just write your email underneath your question, that would be very helpful. And Diana asks, if a current program is already receiving youth-specific funding from Building Changes, are they still eligible to apply for the Washington Youth and Families Fund, or would that be a concern? That's not a concern. There is nothing in the current or formal agreements with Building Changes that disqualify or make an organization ineligible to apply for funding if they already have funding. So while we will take into consideration the work that is being done, your current funding and your current relationship does not have an advantage or a disadvantage to you applying to the Washington Youth and Families Fund. Deanna, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, but maybe I can provide a bit more context. So I work at Together, and Host Homes is a grantee of of building changes, really great partnership. And so I'm the program director for the community schools program, the sister program at Together. And so this question comes from the idea of if it would be, I don't know, maybe unethical, or if it would be a concern if we both programs applied for this, or if it would be better that we each applied separately. Yeah, so more context on that specific answer or question.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Um, no, I don't think it would. It's because it's, again, the work that's being done isn't going to have an additional weight on an application, and it's also not going to make us look at the organization funny. Um, it is, although the application is a letter of interest and it has been condensed, it still is a heavy requirement on any organization seeking for funding. So I would just, as long as you and your partners are have reviewed the information, the strategy, and the needs, and it aligns with what you're currently doing, and it aligns with being able to continue to fund that and get community services out to community members, I would say apply.
Okay, thank you for answering that.
Mhm. And then Kaylana asks, could we get some information on what qualifies as culturally rooted healing services and healing-centered engagement? Yes. So one clear example that I think about is our partnership with Mother Nation here in Seattle. Mother Nation exists to connect Native and Indigenous people to culturally competent and relevant services. So if someone is here in Washington and their family is from the East Coast and they've been disconnected from their tribe or from their nation, they can go to Mother Nation and experience that reconnection by way of sometimes people who are from the same land that they are, or by way of connection to a sweat or a talking grief circle, or a circle that's just of folks that look like that person who's coming in for a service. Um, and it go really, the depth is what the community member dictates. When we say by and for, we do want the person seeking services to feel reflected in the person providing those services, whether that be they are of lived experience or they have grown up alongside this community and culture. Kaylina, does that answer the first part of your question?
Yeah, so I guess one quick clarification there. For culturally rooted healing services like healing-centered engagement, is that going to be services that you have to provide within your organization, or would it be okay? Because it kind of sounds like with Mother Nation, maybe it was like referrals to other organizations in the area and kind of like that connection. That be considered like those types of services, or would it need to be like in the organization?
I'm so sorry, Kaylina. I only got a portion of your first part. My sound for your audio is not coming in as clear. Is there a way that you could repeat that question or maybe type it into the chat?
Yes. I'll try and text it into the chat. I'll reply on my message and see if that works. Sorry about that.
And I'm sorry, I did not capture that either. But I am going
Sounded
to
like there might have been, the question might have been, do we have to provide those culturally responsive services directly, or can we partner with another organization to connect someone with those services? But if I misrepresented or misunderstood that, it was really challenging to hear. Maybe entering in the chat would be better.
Yeah, I see Kaylina is entering it. I'm going to go ahead and respond to the second portion of the question, but Kaylina also says that you essentially got the essence of the question. So both are okay. I mean, sorry, it is encouraged and it is required that if the organization does not provide those healing services, that they partner with an organization who's able to get that culturally competent care and access. The second part of the question is, while the RFP provided some examples of what these services might entail, I am hoping to find a clearer definition of what the services entail so we can assess if our organization is equipped to provide those services. I would say that the way that I would define it, like if your organization helps immigrants and refugees, but those immigrants and refugees are not feeling seen or can't have the safety of divulging more than the information that they may be forced to come with, like say need for housing assistance, but there may be like several needs down the back that just aren't accessible because there is no relationship, because it's not culturally attuned and it's not culturally responsive, then I would not feel confident in that ability for that organization to provide accessible, culturally competent, and attuned care. If the remedy for that is to bring in a third party, I would caution or consider what the disconnect may be for having to interrupt service and continue service and then have that triage, or if that partnership means including them within the work that's already happening so there is no um, lapse or space in care. So it's not that it's like I keep going back to dictated by community needs. So if community needs dictate that that's the model of service delivery that works for them, then you have your answer. And if it doesn't, then you also have your answer. Okay, we do have a couple, looks like 20 plus questions that are new, but we are at time. So I will focus on getting the
So
rest of
Alice,
those questions back. Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, would Dimitri and Julius here had asked that they do a plug for the youth and young adult
Let's plug it
RFP? A lot of
in.
the questions here are pertaining to youth work and youth families, and so I do want to do a plug for that as another additional opportunity of a RFP.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to either Dimitri or Julius to introduce the Youth and Young Adults RFP that we'll be launching here at the end of this month.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so my name's Julius Henriksen. I have been with Building Changes since February as the Youth and Young Adult Diversion Portfolio Specialist. We're going to be putting out an RFP on the youth and young adult side of the WOOF contract. We're hoping here in about like a week and a half. And so our focus is going to be on ensuring that we have flexible funding available to community partners through a centralized diversion model that's also in support of like larger community efforts to reduce and effectively end homelessness for unaccompanied minor youth 12 through 17 and young adults 18 through 24. So we'll have a lot more information about that, and obviously we'll be able to share the post when that RFP is released. So if you have questions, definitely please feel free to reach out, and we'll be keeping folks posted when that comes available. I can put my email in the chat as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Julius. And yes, there will be an email that goes out alerting our networks and folks that we are connected with of the new strategy. And there will also be information on our website. It will follow the same pathway that I showed you at the beginning. So just follow that if it's not immediately a banner at the top of our webpage. Recording of this FAQ and the questions will be posted on our website in a week's time. And we will be accepting further questions, I believe, like up until Friday. So if you have any questions, please reach out. I will put the Washington Youth and Families Fund email into the chat so that everyone has it.
At last, can
Oh,
you hear me?
yes. Tarsani, thank you so much. You had your hand raised. Go ahead.
It's okay. I was just wondering if we can have a recording sent to our email address, or do we have to wait a week from now to see it on your website?
So the video will be ready to process not today. So it'll be processing and ready to be put out within a week. I can send you the link like when it's ready.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Tarsani, could you pop your email into the chat?
Of course. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I got your email, Tarseni. I got it in the chat.
Ah, thank you, Mandy.
Awesome. Thank you, Mandy.
And then I'm just verifying the WOOF email address is WOOF at Building Change. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we've Dimitri entered it earlier, and then I just recopied it recently, so it should be present
Okay.
in the chat.
Thank you so much. All right, so it should be there. Please reach out with any questions, and hopefully we will see a bulk of you back for the Washington Youth and Families YYA portion of this. Thank you all so much for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Atlas, can I ask a quick eligibility question? I think there were like 3 or 4 folks that upvoted it, and it was one of the first questions, but it got buried somehow.
Oh no, yeah, go ahead.
Are food banks eligible to apply, or are you looking for organizations that have a specific mission and program focused on homelessness?
So we are specifically within the business and sector of assisting families and youth and young adults out of homelessness, and the organizations that we partner with do have to have a housing focus. If it has a food bank focus, that is wonderful. But if it's not a food bank that provides housing services and access, then we are not able to partner with you at this time, unless you partner with an organization that has dedicated services to housing for families.
So it's a food bank that does provide homelessness prevention services. So it sounds like yes, eligible. It doesn't have to be mission focused solely on homelessness. It can be programs that are focused on homelessness.
Yes, those programs have to focus on housing, like either on reentry, on not losing housing, or stabling and accessing housing. So it can't just be like tangential or adjacent to housing services.
Okay, got it.
Bailey, do you mind sharing your organization's name?
I'm working on behalf of a couple of different clients. I'm a grant writing consultant.
Oh, okay. And each of them are a food bank housing organization?
One of them is North Helpline, and others kind of just have like housing. I'm here to learn and and just see about eligibility.
Okay.
Cool.
Thanks
Well, thank you
for
so much for
answering
your
that.
question, Bailey. Yeah, so I did see in the chat that the recording will be available a lot sooner than anticipated by what I said. So it will be posted in the same area where the funding application is located.
I don't want to just cut nobody. I can't figure out how to raise my hand on this Zoom call. My name is Crystal, and I had a question about. I work with community passageways, and we don't have a focus on housing, but we do a lot of housing assistance, like eviction prevention, and we already are working with building changes at Rainier Beach. So we're starting to focus on housing. So is that something we're able to apply for, even though that's not something that we're known for?
If that's something that the organization is like currently actively in the space of working in, and the organization seeks to deepen
expand,
their knowledge and their reach into housing services, yes, go ahead and apply. The organization does not already have to be delivering housing services.
Okay.
But the point is that that is an expectation of what is to come.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Crystal.
These are great questions, y'all, and I really appreciate that we have such a diverse group of folks here. At Building Changes, we definitely look at things a little differently. We know that housing supports is really the foundation to make sure that folks can have a well-meaning, successful lifestyle and opportunity. And then we also realize traditionally our systems have been exclusive on how to get access to those resources. So that's what the brilliance of Atlas's RFP strategy. This RFP strategy is around acknowledging that, especially like organizations that are doing those critical things around basic needs and healing, actually allow our communities to be stable in their housing. So where we'll always be looking for like what was the final outcome, what was the final place in which a family was stabilized by their housing situation, we recognize a lot of y'all are doing that work, just not getting the recognition for it. So great questions. And yeah, we encourage folks to apply. The application process will allow us to know a little bit more about you.
Yeah.
All right, could I ask one question? I couldn't find the raise hand button.
Mm-hmm.
So we work in partnership with King County Housing Authority to serve youth in like an after-school capacity with like food and a lot of things, family support. But I'm wondering, because they're in low-income housing, would that qualify? We
I
do
don't
often
know.
help with like people who are at risk of eviction and stuff, but we don't specifically provide housing.
Oh, okay. I was like, I don't know what the caveat of it being low housing or why that would be a barrier would mean, but now I see as to why you mentioned it. So we have a partner in Skagit Valley who accesses family needs and assists families avoiding homelessness through youth programs and youth partnerships. They're an after-school program and they provide heavily on continuing education and making sure that kids are able to stay in school and get to school. But through that relationship, they're able to discover like family needs, such as, a family may be on eviction notice or they may have 3 months of back rent, and that way they are able to provide those pathways. However, they do provide like assistance with not losing housing, assistance with getting housing, case management, and that sort. And that would be an expectation of the program. So it wouldn't just be able to solely rely on uh, assisting the after school program. Does that answer your question, Ashley?
I think so, yeah. Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question? Like we have until 12:15. We have 4 minutes for questions.
I have a question. It sounds like you all try to prioritize new grantees with each funding cycle. Is that correct?
That ends up happening. Like our most recent partnership, all of the organizations were less than 3 years old. And the purpose for that is because when we have access to provide a commerce contract, a government contract, I, for one, would like to see organizations that haven't had that ability or maybe don't have the resources in order to get into that room. So that would be the reason why most of our partnerships in the last two cohorts have been younger, newer organizations, less than 5 years. However, that's not always the case because as we named, we also wanted to have organizations that were ready to go for HMIS, which is not the case for organizations that are 3 years and younger. That's just been what the last two cohorts have consisted of. That is not a fast rule or a hard rule. Megan, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful information. My question was more like, for example, if someone was previously provided the funding in a previous cohort, do you all preference individuals that haven't received this funding in a previous cohort?
Oh, okay. Thank you for that clarification. So previous and or current funding is taken into consideration, but it does not have an advantage or a disadvantage when applying for current new funding. So like if they were a previous grantee and it gave us insight to what that reach was able to have with community members and the way that services were, we were able to take that into consideration and be like, wow, that's great work being done. However, it does not work as an advantage or a disadvantage when considering this current pot of funding. Okay, thank you. And then I see Kaylina, go ahead.
Hi, I've connected my camera and I think the audio hopefully should be better. I dropped my question in the
So much
chat
better.
though. Okay,
Yeah.
great. I dropped my question in the chat. I need to chat with some people at my organization to see if we would have the capacity to maybe implement these services. But I was just curious if at this time we decide to not move forward, are there any opportunities that Building Changes offers for like training on, especially like the culturally rooted like healing services and healing centered engagement? Because I think my organization might be interested in participating in that if there were any opportunities.
Okay. So Building Changes itself does not have, we don't have any trainings that are specifically focused on that. What I would recommend though is getting that hands-on in-person learning. So that might mean we connect um, on a separate occasion and after, well, I would connect with the partners first and see like, hey, what are you open in order to essentially skill sharing with another organization that maybe isn't so rooted in the practice of cultural attunement, but is rooted in the fact of providing services for the community that you provide, and that may be immigrants and refugees. So that might mean like coming in and building that partnership and asking those questions so that you can learn firsthand from the providers that are doing that work.
Yep, that sounds great. Thank you so much.
And I'm going to do a shameless plug. Our education team does provide trainings. We have training around serving specific populations, know your rights, and we also do cross organizations joint trainings. And so if that is some interest of you, if you can subscribe to getting notifications from building changes, and we'll make sure that whenever we have our school housing network is one of those. And so there are other trainings and tailored trainings that we can provide you or, work with you on. And so if you're in the learning phase, we would love to convene and see where some of those gaps are and connect you with other organizations who are also doing that work. And so there's definitely convening and learning opportunities at Building Changes.
Amazing. We'll keep an eye out for those.
Yeah.
And Catherine has put a couple of those links actually in the chat. So really easy access links so that y'all can join. Some of them are coming up actually here on the 19th and the 20th. So as Marette mentioned, there are other trainings that would advance the work. One of those would be the storytelling for advocacy, and that happens on Wednesday, November 19th. So even if it's not culturally attuned, it is maybe in the vein of sharing that work is being done so that connection with culturally attuned organizations can happen. And then the following day, there is also something that's very relevant for housing, which is tenants' rights training. So options for when you can't pay your rent, which is happening on November 20th, hosted by Solid Ground. Kaylina, did that answer your question?
Yes, that did. Thank you guys so much for all the information.
Awesome. And thank you all for your additional questions. Thank you so much to Marette and Dimitri for popping in there and answering and filling in with additional details. But that wraps it up for us today. Please check out on our website for the recording of today's session. And please feel free to reach out to me via email if you have any questions. Thank you all so much.